Hey guys. So I didn't lose the bet officially yet, but I got delayed a little bit again by Mr. Spangler. And so instead I have Kimberly, his PR officer, who's going to come on. We're going to talk about some stuff. And we are going to reschedule Sheriff Spangler, and we will get him on the show. I win bets, especially against Mr. Matt Shears of the Democratic Party. We are almost agreement at gmail.com, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Our website is up and running. Check it out at almostagreement.com. All the current episodes are up to date. I'm working through the back catalog, get them all on there. There's contact information there, as well as any other things that you might want to know more about us with. If you can do us a solid favor, share the website, share our Facebook page, share our Twitter feed, tell your friends about us, get other people listening. We're active, wanting to know what's going on in our community, the people and the powers at play that do what they do. And the more we grow, the more we can push for more influential people, really having to answer some questions. So I'm going to pause this for a second, get Miss Kimberly set up, and we will go from there.
You just start over, and we'll go from there.
Okay. All right, everybody. We have Miss Kimberly Glenn from the Knox County Sheriff's Office. I have to start out with a little bit of a poke at the sheriff for being too busy to get on schedule and get him in here because I need to win the bet. It's not so important that I get information. It's just important that I win the bet. But that aside, Kimberly graciously offered to kind of sit in for the day, and we'll get the sheriff maybe next week or later this week or something like that. And we've had all sorts of fun tech issues to start today's episode, and so we're kind of starting over. So some of this stuff we've already talked about. And so the first thing we were kind of discussing was where the sheriff sits in like the hierarchy of the state between the city, county, state governments, as well as the federal government, I guess, technically, and where the authority comes from, and then where the responsibility lies in answering. So, Kimberly, if you'd like to go ahead and start from there, and I'll interject with probably a new set of questions because my train of thought's all over the place.
That's okay. Hey, and it is my job to make sure you win the bet. So we'll make sure that you are able to get the sheriff. What I love about Tom Spangler is he's a very active sheriff. He's a hardworking sheriff, and so I don't know how he keeps up with his calendar because it's hard for most of us. So I appreciate you allowing me to sit in for him and having me on your show, and I certainly appreciate your willingness to get involved in the political process. A lot of people will sit and complain that they don't like the way something's going or they want to see change, but never take the initiative
Right.
to do something about it. So I'm appreciative about that.
Well, thank you. And I want to interject there because one of the things that I have probably the biggest issue with is I hate the politics, but I understand that the politics comes along with the governance. And that's one of those little A-B things that the further I've gotten into this, the more I've kind of come to understand is that politics needs government needs politics. They have to exist for the other to work. And the government's the one that I care about. What our government's doing, who our government is, that kind of thing. It just so happens that I have to deal with politics as part of it. And so I almost resent the fact that I know so much about politics because that's not what I'm chasing down. It's just a requirement of the government side.
Well, you can look at it like I look at it, and I look at it as a process. It's part of the journey, and I always call it the political process. The sheriff has always said, I'm not a politician, I'm an elected official. At any point in time that the voters decide that I'm not doing an adequate job, then they can vote me out. That's why we have term limits, and that's why we have election cycles for the sheriff every 4 years, as well as the mayor. The mayor's race and the sheriff's race coincide. They run simultaneously, and those are two very important offices in our county government structure. So I appreciate your willingness to be involved in that process because
that made me think
about the journey.
That made me think of an interesting question. Do we think that's intentional, that it was set up that way for them to run at the same time so that we don't have a mayor in place and then on that off year or that off cycle we have a sheriff that a mayor likes or doesn't like that's trying to run and that some of that stuff could interfere with it? Do we think that was intentional whenever it was set up that way?
I'm not sure, really. That was probably before the time that I got involved in the political process. But I think it's very smart for both new administrations, to start out together. It's been a very smooth process, for Mayor Jacobs and Sheriff Spangler and both of our teams to work together. So maybe it was done intentionally. For example, in Knox County, the property assessor runs at the same time as the presidential election, and some of the county commission seats, as I'm sure you've already learned by interviewing some of those folks, and city council, those stagger. Not everybody runs at the same time, thankfully.
Right.
I don't know that the city or the county can handle all that.
Well, I had Mr. Davis from the Election Commission on last week, and we were discussing how crazy 22 is going to be. 22's got, I think he said there's going to be 60-something items. We got a bunch of clerks, a bunch of judges, the sheriff, obviously, as well as the mayor, a couple of commissioners.
The district attorneys actually, because their cycle's different, so the district attorney will be on the ballot as well.
Yeah, so
it will be a very busy year, and Chris Davis is a great guy. If anybody can handle it, he can.
Right, and so I'm looking. There will be no shortage of content for me moving forward into 2022.
Yes, correct. Yes.
So okay, so anyway,
back
to
your question. Let me answer. Yeah, let me answer your question. So, and this is confusing for a lot of people. I know it certainly was me. Several years ago, Knox County, the sheriff is the highest law enforcement officer or official in the county, and inside the county you have the city limits. So you have the Knoxville Police Department that manages, if you will, inside the city limits, and the police chief over there, Eve Thomas, does a great job, is appointed by the mayor. Unlike the sheriff, as we've just discussed, the sheriff and the mayor are both elected officials. Both run their offices independently of one another. Maybe a mayor wouldn't like what the sheriff's doing or vice versa, but they are elected officials, and they're hired, so to speak, by the voters. So I think that that's one of the best ways, in my opinion, to get a job, is be elected. And that means that at the same time, if somebody doesn't agree with what you're doing, they don't have to vote you back into office.
Right. But, okay. Yeah, I get that. I do. The problem, I don't even know where I want to go with this. What we talked about the other day, we talked about, and I think this was helpful, talking about that the city has, KPD has jurisdiction inside the city, and the county has jurisdiction in all of the county, which includes the city limits. Right. It's one of those that I go back and forth personally on. Like, I really like the idea that we vote for the sheriff. I think that is important, but at the same time, I have concerns about the oversight. Like, is there something that the sheriff has in place where he has a community? Because I think if I can't remember correctly if Miss Oster was a city or county on that thing. She was in some sort of a group that does something with law enforcement. I can't remember, but is there a program that the sheriff does? The Merit Council is what we have. I think the city has something different. I think it's called PAC or something like that. Yeah, than we do. That's correct. And then the sheriff is obviously when he was elected, Governor Haslam at that point, he appointed him to the TCI, which is the Tennessee Correctional Institute Board. Once Governor Lee was elected, he appointed Sheriff Spangler. He just concluded that term as chairman of the Post Commission, and that's the police officer training that they get. And so that's an association, that's where your sheriff's office training comes from. That's where our officers become what we call post-certified. They get all their formal training, and Sheriff Spangler was instrumental here in establishing the Regional Training Academy. Many years ago, folks would have to go to Donaldson in West Tennessee to become certified law enforcement officers. So we're very blessed in our region to have an academy here. Blount County has an academy. So law enforcement's come a long way for the sheriff's office and for the state of Tennessee in general. Okay, that brings up one of the things that I didn't mention in prepping on this that I had thoughts about, and I don't expect you to have the specific stats off the top of your head, but there's a special forces guy. His name's Jocko Wilnick. He's kind of famous. He's kind of a big deal, but he was on a podcast, and I was listening to him talk about some of the different incidents that have happened over the last year or two, especially the 2020 crazy summer we had last year. And one of his concerns was the amount of training, because he was saying that he feels like law enforcement needs to be training more often, more regularly. Is there a protocol that you guys have kind of set in place as far as in 100 hours out in the community, there's 20 hours of training or anything of that nature?
We have a 40-hour a year after they complete the academy. Then here at the sheriff's office, they go what we call a field training program, and they're a probational officer at that point. That means that they are put with a FTO, which is a field training officer, and they are called a PO, which is a probationary officer, and that means that they're on probation. They have to pass that cycle too. Just because they graduate the academy and become state certified does not mean that they'll be allowed to work as a certified officer. So to give you a little background about that, what that means is they'll be in the car with a field training officer until the probationary period is over, and they go through different phases of that, like phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. In each phase, say one phase you might work on paperwork, another phase you might perfect your driving skills, another phase you're working on officer safety, you're performing traffic stops and different things like that. So they have that training. In addition to every year, they are required to complete a 40-hour in-service. And like I said, we are very blessed here to have a regional training academy as part of the sheriff's office. So we don't have to go somewhere else. We have our own firing range. We have, they can go up there, and we have defensive tactics that, we have all types of classes that are taught here and held here because of our facilities. So for our men and women, I think they're very blessed to have this at their disposal. And a lot of smaller agencies aren't that fortunate. But we are. We've got state-of-the-art training. We've got great facilities for people to learn. We bring in special guests all the time to teach and our men and women, and not just our law enforcement officers, but other personnel as well. They may go through. We just completed an expert witness class here, which was people from all over Tennessee came, and we were the host of it, but that is an expert witness for arson investigation. So lots of different things go on here, lots of different moving parts. Another thing that you and I talked about that a lot of people don't understand is Sheriff Spangler. All sheriffs are responsible for housing their inmates. They're also responsible in the state of Tennessee for mental health transportation. So we house inmates that we arrest at the Knox County Sheriff's Office, as well as inmates that KPD, UTPD, THP, and some marshals. We house all those inmates, and that is the sheriff's office responsibility. So whoever the sheriff is, that is his or her responsibility. Additionally, mental health transport. You're just coming on the political scene. This is something that you might want to dive into. Many years ago, we had a Lakeshore mental health facility that no longer exists. So from that, we see a huge increase in the homeless population that both the city and the county deal with. Additionally, we, as the Knox County Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Spangler is not a medical doctor, but ironically, he houses more mental health patients than any other facility around us. And the reason for that is because there's nowhere else for them to go. It's a very sad situation. A lot of these people, and he's very compassionate about that. A lot of the folks don't need to be incarcerated. They need long-term mental health care, and we just don't have those facilities.
So just to clarify the term a little bit, when you say house, that we're talking about the county up there on the north side of town.
We have KCJ, which is underneath the city county building. That's the Knox County Jail. That primarily houses your murderers, offenders that require maximum security. There are maximum security inmates out at the Roger D. Wilson Detention Facility out on Maloneyville Road. Some people think that there are not, but there are. They have, a pod out there for maximum security because we're under a federal cap here at KCJ. So we typically, like today, we had 191 folks at the Knox County Jail, which is under the city county building. And then we've got about 593 or so, I believe, at the Roger D. Wilson Detention Facility. I think we've got 60 plus on work release. So we have a work release program as well, and that's for your low-level offenders.
Right. We were discussing when we were discussing it the other day. You said 593 in county, 191 in the city, in the city county building. And 80 on work release. A total of around 860 that are inside, semi-inside the system currently.
Correct. And part of those folks, unfortunately, have mental health issues, and they've committed a crime of some sort. But because there's not a mental health facility, then they are housed as an inmate at the Knox County, at the detention facility. We spent last year about $900,000 on psychotropic medications. Additionally, we have a doctor on staff. There's nurse practitioners. There's nursing staff. There's medical assistants. There's a dentist. So it really is the detention facility out on Maloneyville Road is basically a small city in and of itself.
Right. Okay. Yeah,
and you and I talked about too, so this is important. When Sheriff Spangler took office, we averaged around 1,200 to 1,400 inmates versus the numbers that we have now. There were approximately 400 people on what we call pretrial release. A lot of people think that the sheriff just decides who stays and who goes, and that's not correct. Like we discussed earlier in this podcast, the sheriff and his deputies are responsible for enforcing the laws. So once someone is arrested and they are processed, then they go through the judicial system. It is up to the judge or the magistrate how much a bond is set for, whether they are a candidate for pretrial release, and if and when they'll be released, if they're awaiting a jury trial. So pretrial release, as of yesterday, we had about 3,000 plus, I think 3,090 folks on pretrial release. And that is the people that the judicial system has said, okay, we're going to let you out of jail while you're awaiting trial for your offense. And in the meantime, you're going to be monitored by a caseworker who works for the pretrial release at the Knox County Sheriff's Office, and you're going to wear an ankle bracelet. Those folks have to pay monthly for their ankle bracelet, but they're not sitting incarcerated in the jail. And that is something that has drastically changed. That program has grown exponentially from 400 to 3,000 plus folks in just around 2 years. COVID was partly responsible for that because we were under a Supreme Court order. The courts were about how they were to operate. We never stopped at the Knox County Sheriff's Office. Everybody kept, doing their job, but the Supreme Court had ruled how the courts would operate and when they would close. So I certainly feel for those folks because I know they are dealing with a huge backlog as they begin to open.
Right. These numbers might change real fast as things start really, really moving back in the judicial side. And again, and as you told me when we were talking on the phone in pre-stuff, because one of the questions that I had, and that is not answerable by you, but it's one of the issues that has been brought to my attention by another, is that there's a large percent. Okay, let me back up. I lean pretty strongly libertarian personally.
Yes.
And so one of the things to me is in the topic we were discussing is this, we're supposed to operate on the premise of innocent until proven guilty. And so the idea of having to sit in jail while you await the trial to prove your guilt seems a little antithetical to me. And again, trying to be a little bit more pragmatic about it and understanding that there's certain circumstances change and certain things like that. Point is, I'd heard a stat at one point of that like I was telling you yesterday, I heard a stat at one point that Knox County housed more people awaiting trial than it did actual convicted criminals. And I need to go do my research on that. Because it's a court issue, it's not a sheriff's office issue. Sheriff just holds the people the court tells them to hold on to. I get it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so, all right, to get to the...
You're a quick learner.
I try to be.
Like it. Basically just repeated back to me, and I had to learn that process too. And just touching on the fact that you said you lean toward more a libertarian. Here's what we're missing in our entire country, Seth, is that you're telling me you're libertarian and I am a Republican, but you know what? We can still get along. We can still have a conversation.
Well,
and
I think
we're always going to agree, but we can agree to disagree.
Well, I think what's probably special about you to me is that you are not an actual law enforcement officer. You are an employee of the office.
Yes.
Because that brings me to one of the the big overarching issue. But I don't know. I kind of want to save it for the sheriff. Maybe you can prep him on it. I don't know. Okay. It's the relationship, the relationship between law enforcement in general, not just your office, but the city as well as state and all other whatevers, and the regular Joe. In my experience personally, it's one of those, like, I'm of the ilk that if I go a whole day without seeing a police officer or even better interacting with one, that's a good day for me. I'm not doing anything wrong. There's nothing I'm doing. It's just that there's that general attitude, which is partially my fault. It's also been fostered by years of different things happening here and there that cause that distrust thing. But there's the relationship between law enforcement and John Q. Citizen, for lack of a better word, especially over the last year and a half, is exceptionally strained. And it's one of those to me that we hear a lot of conversation about what do we do, and I never really see anything that feels like it's moving that direction. Now, to be fair, Scott Barker from the Compass, I was talking to him over the weekend, and he made a really good point of something I hadn't considered, because I've been lucky enough to never have in a situation where I wanted one. I've never been in a place where I need a police officer now. And so maybe to be fair to the conversation, that may give me a slight bias, because most of my interactions have been usually my own fault. In fairness, my record, which I'm sure you already have looked at, is well deserved. I absolutely deserved the things that happened to me as a result of the things that I did, and I have no complaints about that. But because that seems to be like the overwhelming conversation that continues to happen. And I would like to talk to the sheriff about that. I wouldn't mind your opinion on that as well. But if we want to leave that out, we can leave that out. It's not super important to me.
I actually think I'm one of the best people to talk to about that, and here's why. I am a civilian. I'm the communications director. I have a realtor background. I've been a realtor for 17 years. I've been a broker, a principal broker, and I've been a business owner. And I appreciate the fact that you admit that you've had your interactions with law enforcement have been your own fault. I haven't looked you up because I'm not a law enforcement officer, but I did Facebook stalk you. So,
okay. Well, because
before we talked,
you did tell me some things earlier that I didn't tell you, and so I was like, she's looking into me.
I'm looking, but see, not like they would look into you, not like my detective sitting here, right?
Right.
So now he's probably already pulling up everything he can. No, I'm kidding.
I have.
It is fine, but you know what? Here is some examples of what I found. When I came here, the Citizens Academy had been dormant and dead for over a decade. The sheriff said, I want that started back. I want to bridge that gap between law enforcement and our community. We started the Citizens Academy back. Unfortunately, COVID happened, and we didn't have one last year. I'm hoping, depending on CDC guidelines and how things go, that we could have a much smaller academy. That's where we bring them in for 11 weeks. We bring civilians in and we expose them to the sheriff's office and the different things. Like you get to learn what the detectives do, what aviation does. You get to learn what canine handlers do, patrol. We get to go to what our court officers do, out to the detention facility, down to KCJ. He also brought back the Explorer program. An Explorer is someone who's 14 years of age, or I think it's 14 to 18, and they are allowed to learn what law enforcement officers do. That bridges the gap between youth and what law enforcement is doing. I think that's it's huge. Because
for me, that was the window probably when my attitude shifted from when I was a kid and police officers the coolest thing around. They got to wear a badge and carry a gun and all that kind of stuff. To that window was probably when that view of police officers changed to whatever I have to do to not have to to interact with them, that's a
to
good
interact
thing.
with them.
Yeah.
Right. Regardless, same with like being a principal, like if you, whatever I have to do not to go to the principal's office, I might not be the best student, might not be the most well behaved, but I just don't want to see the principal today.
Because the perception, whether it's reality or not, and maybe you could speak to how close to reality is. The perception it is that you're trying to catch me. You're trying to catch me doing something. I mean, and in some sort of ways it is.
Most of these guys and gals hope they come in and that you behave. And it's a kind of a running joke around here. All right, Knox County, let's behave today because, this is our last night shift or this or that. So essentially they want people to do good. Another thing the sheriff brought back was the DARE program that had been gone for many years. The DARE officer that had retired, who was my children's DARE officer, came back to restart that program and train up other people to do that. She's re-retiring again May 1st. And that's teaching fifth graders about drug education. So very important about the dangers of drugs. And it's not just about, hey, don't do drugs. It's about if you see this, if this is in your home, if your parents, if you find someone unresponsive, here's what you do. So it has a lot more to do than just, hey, don't do drugs. And it gives them a positive experience with law enforcement should they ever need law enforcement, and hopefully keeps them that they think in the back of their mind, oh, I remember, Miss Sheila talking to me about why I shouldn't touch this or why I shouldn't do this. Or mommy's laying in the floor and she's not responsive. I should pick up the phone and, call for help, those type things. But let's get back to this story about the relationship with law enforcement. Just like in real estate, just like physicians, pastors, teachers, preachers, you name it, pharmacists, nurses, doctors, all of them, there's going to be bad in every profession. And if we choose to see the good in people, I think we will. I'm going to give you an experience of this weekend, and it's the sheriff had also had charged me with starting like a food pantry and a toy closet. And that's not just for our officers, although we did have an officer lose everything to a house fire on Christmas Eve and we were able to help them. We have a food pantry and a toy closet, not just for people who may, lose something in a fire, but it is shocking. We have a family crimes unit who deals with domestic abuse, and they deal with child sex crimes and very bad things, the things that your average ordinary citizen, including myself, don't even want to think exist. They see the worst of the worst, and it's happening to our most vulnerable. It's happening to people, who've been abused for years. It's happening to our elderly. It's happening to children. So lots of times they'll go in the home and there's no food, or the children are scared and don't have toys, or just basic things that you think in the United States of America that would absolutely not be possible. It's happening right here, and they're seeing it and they're witnessing it. And then they have those visions in their mind for the rest of their life. So instead of them going out and buying stuff out of their pocket, which they don't, law enforcement's no secret around here, doesn't make a lot of money. He said, let's do this so that we have something that somebody can call immediately and we can get food to somebody in an emergent situation while we work on the long-term situation for that person. In the last 3 weeks alone, we've helped a couple of elderly people who have been victims of financial fraud by their relatives or caregivers. We have helped a mother with 4 children who was raped and beaten, and her abuser was charged, and the children, there wasn't any food in the home. We've also helped. Here's the thing this weekend. I got a call. One of our patrolmen said, hey, I think I remember seeing somewhere that we have a food pantry. And I know that's hard to think that not everybody knows. We have around 1,045 employees at the Knox County Sheriff's Office. And, they read the emails and they remember that you said something about it a few months ago, but they're not sure. And I said, we do. What do you need? And he said, well, we have this situation where this lady's 80 years old. She hasn't had a meal in 3 days, and she has an injured foot. The person that was taking care of her was 84 years old and is now sick and can't take care of her. She has no living family here. She has nobody to look out for her. So I met one of our officers at the storage place where we keep our food pantry, and we got food and baby wipes and things like that. two officers that already went, bought this lady perishable items, stocked her refrigerator with it, and got her a hot meal, the first meal she had had in 3 days. She had been living on peanut butter and crackers, but her peanut butter jar was almost out. One of the officers showed up to meet me at the food pantry, and he's an FTO, field training officer, like we talked about. He had a PO with him who happens to work. She's out through her FTO program, going through as a PO. She's part of the digital intelligence unit, but everybody who's certified has to go through that FTO program. And I found out there that this lady hadn't been able to, with her injured foot, bathe in several days. So basically, she did everything. She helped clean her up, get her sheets changed, her clothes changed, and made her feel human again. That's the side of law enforcement that I'm blessed to be able to experience by working here that I never got to experience before.
Right, and those are the stories that we don't ever get to see on the news because
that's right.
It's only
and
the
they don't
stories.
Want to brag about them. You know, they don't want recognition for that. And my job is to put the pictures of them. You know, like somebody just sent me, our special services unit sent me. They were at a United Methodist Church daycare today, and they took one of our canine dogs out. It is his last PR event before he retires, and he was actually the Canine of the Year last year. So they send me those pictures, and that stuff gets out. But those heartbreaking things, you never hear or see. The mom with 4 children, they didn't have any shampoo, any soap, no toilet paper, no paper towels. And when we took the boxes of food in, the little kids were like not just thankful to have the food. They were taking that food and like putting it in their cabinets and like, oh, look what this is. That's the stuff that we do at the Knox County Sheriff's Office. We're not always perfect. We're never going to be. There are going to be good and bad in every single profession that you have. But for the most part, I'm honored and blessed to work with some of the best men and women that Knox County has. And that is because that's what the sheriff expects of us. He's very kind, very humble, and he's a giver. So that's what he wants us to do.
Well, next time you get a really big story like that, please let me know, and we'll do a special episode on it. Because again, I think that's one of the issues too, is we don't like Scott had illustrated to me, is like I've thankfully not had the opportunity to need a police officer in my life, and so the people that do and are getting the positive results of what law enforcement does do. Could be a start to helping that conversation get a little bit better about how we relate to each other. Because I mean, I think there's an inevitable, and it's one of those that I don't know how to fix it. But there's an inevitable us and them that brews up over time, which I think is part of the problem as well. But that's those are things that we as a community need to hear more about, because then it makes it, hopefully translates it to it's easy to forget that they're people too, that a police officer, a deputy out there running around town is a guy too. He's going to get off work, sadly probably drive to Blount County because he can afford to live there with his salary and not in Knox County. But you know, that whole sub part of the story. So since I have you and not the sheriff, you mentioned a little bit in there about your background in real estate and stuff like that. So how do you get to where you are from selling houses?
That's a great question. My family,
because that's one of my things. Like, I'm always interested. I'm always interested in the periphery people that don't, you know, yes. that are as deep as anybody can possibly get in what's going on, but aren't the star of the show, for lack of a better word, because they're the campaign manager for whomever, or you know, the special assistant, whatever the titles are, that kind of thing.
Right. Well, my husband has been lifelong friends with the sheriff and the sheriff's family. Ironically, I went to school with the sheriff's baby sister. We're not going to talk about age difference because I'd like to keep my job. I love what I do. But the sheriff had announced that he was going to run for election in Knox County. You know, there's a long history. Everybody kind of knows everybody here, or that sort of thing. My extended family, my immediate family, they all have like some either law enforcement or emergency services, firefighter, you know, EMS background. My grandmother's brother, Costo McGee, started the Knoxville Volunteer Rescue Squad here. So I have a long-standing family of that, and I just turned out to be the businesswoman. My uncle and I are both business people.
So the smart one, check.
I don't know about that, but
everybody else is the nice ones that do the nice things.
You all, there's usually not a steady paycheck with us business people, and you know that you're a business owner, so you're the last to get paid usually.
Yeah, but I get to tell everybody else what to do, and it's worth it.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, so basically what happened was my husband said, we really need to help the sheriff with his campaign. The sheriff was running a campaign on a bare bones budget. He couldn't hire, one of the political gurus in town. He asked my husband and I to help him. I bought a couple of books off of Amazon. One was good, one wasn't. And we took it from there. It has really nothing to do with me or my husband. It has everything to do with the fact that Tom Spangler was the most qualified candidate at the time. It has to do with the fact that he is a true police officer. He's a cop's cop. It also has to do with the fact that we had an incredible team. We had a core team, and we had an incredible team of volunteers, over 200 people. And I call them ground pounders. And you, as a business owner, you know what that means. So those folks are responsible for getting Tom Spangler elected. I just ended up, and my husband ended up with the title of campaign manager and co-campaign manager. And we're blessed to be a part of something that, nobody thought could happen. We ran the underdog campaign, and the sheriff won. 65% of the voters that voted that year felt like he would make a good sheriff, and here he is. And I never expected to come to work at the Knox County Sheriff's Office. I enjoyed what I did, but I thought it was an opportunity to expand.
Yeah, well, you screwed up because real estate's where to be right now.
Real estate's crazy right now.
If you can find a house to sell, you're getting paid.
If you can find one to sell, yes. So that's the problem. There are no listings. But the sheriff, gave me an opportunity to try to come help him with his vision. And my only job, I do more than just disseminate information to the media. I do a lot of that. But my job is to humanize the badge. Another part of my job is community involvement and governmental affairs to help change things that may be broken and to fill in the gaps. And literally that means if somebody has a need and they need a casserole, well, I might be the one to do that. It means that if the bathroom's dirty and somebody didn't show up at PBA to clean the bathroom, well, I might be cleaning the bathroom. It doesn't matter. Whatever needs to be done, I'm willing to do it. And I'm willing to help the men and women at the Knox County Sheriff's Office because they literally risk their lives to ensure the safety of mine and my families.
All right. So super personal question. When's the last time you got a ticket?
It's been a minute. I used to have a real problem with tickets. Like you, I did not want to run into a police officer. It wasn't because I thought I was going to get arrested. It was because I was like, was I speeding again?
Right. I got to go sell another house so I can pay this ticket.
Yes, that's right. Probably, honest question, maybe in 2000 or so. Yeah, it's been a long time. My husband really got aggravated with maybe 2003 might have been the last one because I was the insurance liability in our household.
Right. Eventually everybody grows up, I guess.
We all grow up.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like I said, I don't like, again, for me and the show and what I'm doing here is I acknowledge the lack of knowledge and I'm stubborn and ignorant enough to just follow the thread and ask the people that are supposed to know the answers. And then what I'm finding most commonly is that the system is so overlapping and complicated that the stat I heard about how many people are being held awaiting trial, it turns out that, well, that's not this subsect. Like it's like trying to call the IRS and get an answer. It's like 15 different people before you get the person that actually knows or is actually responsible for answering your question. So
when I said I feel bad for the courts and how backlogged they are, I really do. Mike Hammond does a great job. The criminal court clerk here does a great job. But, judges can see what they can see, in a work day. And
right. And another thing,
it would be okay, right?
Right. Another thing that I'm finding as I'm talking to a lot of different people, I had Mr. Lutton on back last year when he was running. And one of the things that the public defender's office does is some of these similar, like you guys have your storage facility with things that people need when you find occasion to it. And there's a bunch of stuff that's linked in with that. And like I'm finding a lot of this where it's not, it may not be, it's repeated function, I guess, but it's different people doing the same thing in different organizations. And I'm always curious if everybody's aware of it, or if it's just everybody's doing their own version of the thing, and everybody's filling the gaps where they see them. And if there'd be any value.
I think that's the biggest thing. If we all just did what we saw needed to be done.
I was thinking the other way is that
at the detention facility. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. We have 23 programs there to help. Imagine being incarcerated for a crime and trying to be rehabilitated and integrate yourself back into society. And you have no clothes. You don't even have proper attire for a job interview. Maybe you came to jail in the winter or the summer, and now it's winter when you get released and you don't have a coat. So we started a clothing closet at the detention facility to help equip people with clothes for job interviews or just clothing in general, because we saw that was a need. And we could easily meet that. We had the storage place. People donated clothes to our different precincts. And I know what you're probably going to say is that, well, maybe if everybody got together, and unfortunately, Knox County is just too big to all get together. But if we're aware, and people realize that we have that, like there's a liaison up in the courts, and she knows that we have this clothing closet.
Right.
So if she knows there's a need, she can call out to our detention facility and make that happen. So I think it's just making people aware of what you're doing.
Right, because again, it goes to what you were saying earlier about how many people are being housed more on mental issues than legal issues. And I had Miss Marty from Care Cuts on, and
I love Marty.
She talks about all the mental health issues that a lot of her clients, for lack of a better word, deal with and stuff like that. And because when I was talking to her, I was telling her about the Lutton thing as well. It's like it seems to me that there's a lot of different people doing a lot of good things that. If somebody smarter than me could, even just like a little black book of who to call on X, that we could we could move through some of these different departments, so that instead of everybody trying to cover all the bases, you guys can cover base A, this other group can cover base B, but that you have an option if again, going back to one of your examples, like kids with no food or toys or whatever. Well, the toys part could be if the public defender's office has that part of things covered, that you can use that resource instead of you trying to resource it yourself, as well as all the other things you're trying to resource. So I don't know. I'm throwing ideas out on that one.
Well, and you just and here's what you said. You said Miss Marty. Marty is a hairdresser and owns a hair salon by trade. I'm a realtor. I've never sold Marty a house, nor has she ever bought a house from me, but yet I know Marty. So it's about being involved in your community and getting to know people. And I kind of look at myself as the connector sometimes. I actually call myself a professional beggar. So if you know of a need and you know someone that can meet that need, then you just go ask them. And like, I know what Marty does. So and Marty and I've worked on a situation together recently. So I think it's about getting out in your community, which is what you're doing. Again, I applaud you for that. Before I managed the sheriff's campaign, I wasn't very politically involved. I've always been an avid voter, but I wasn't very involved in the process. I've learned so much and have enjoyed the process and expanded my knowledge, just like you're doing now. And I think if everybody just does a little, we don't all have to do it all and be superheroes. But if everybody just does what they can. And another thing, I'll be 50 years old this year, and the last 20 years.
And you said that Spangler's way older than you are, so you
did not say it was way older than me.
You tried to not show his age, but you did it.
I did not say way older.
Well, if you need a job, I don't have one for you, but if you get fired for telling us all how old he is.
Those businesses. But I have always, the last 20 years, and I think this came from my church, about intentional living. And I'm a huge animal advocate. Rescue, actually bought land to, build and rescue animals. However, I think the biggest thing that I've got to witness here at the sheriff's office is that if people see that there's a need, then they're doing what it takes. They can't fix everything, but they can help one person at a time. And for, at least the last 20 years, I've been really focused on that, whether it's one person or one animal at a time, and instead of trying to, feed all the homeless. Miss Marty does a great job, doing stuff like that. But if one person runs across our path that we can help, and it doesn't matter if you're in law enforcement, if you're a teacher, a pastor, a nurse, or, a firefighter, whatever you do, and the officers this past weekend were the example. They can't help everybody who doesn't have family. They can't help every person that hasn't had a meal in 3 days. They can't partially give everybody a bath that doesn't have anybody to take care of them. But they ran across this one lady, and it was a divine appointment for that lady that day, and probably them. They probably got a bigger blessing than she did. And they were able to help her. So it's really just whatever God puts in your path, I believe we need to act on that.
All right, I think it can't get a better way to wrap up a show than that. I've got you on record have already told me that you're going to help me win my bet, and we need to get that done.
I will do that. Yes.
I appreciate your time. I hope this is the beginnings of more conversations. I want to know more of what's going on in a lot of different parts and pieces, and especially this relationship question that we were talking about. I really think it is a broken relationship on a lot of levels. Like you were talking about it in there, even with that last little bit about who's doing what you can for your neighbors, because I think part of what we've become as people is we've gotten really comfortable with the somebody else will take care of it idea. Specifically the government. On my libertarian part of things, I reject the idea that the government's going to be the one to fix it. I can fix it, or I can network with the people that I know to fix the problem. I don't need a government entity to do it, because what ends up happening with those is it ends up trying to fix it for everybody, and it never works right.
Never works right. You to come when it's safe to do so. I'll take you on a tour of the detention facility at KCSO.
I had a tour, and it was not. I don't want to do that again.
You had a tour. You're on private tour.
It wasn't a guided tour. Well, it was guided, I guess.
I'll give you a guided tour. It'll be a little different. You'll have it from. See, it's about how you view things, so you'll have a different view. I've got a laundry list of invites to once we're allowed to do so, and I'll add that to it. Well, Kimberly, I can't thank you enough. I'm going to do an outro. If you want to hang up through the outro or not, that's up to you. But I'm going to do a little close of the show. And again, I can't thank you enough. Thank you. Take care.
Kimberly Glenn, everybody. Realtor turned PR extraordinaire for the sheriff's office, and Mr. Spangler's campaign manager, for lack of a better word, which I'm sure we'll have her back on here. And I'll wait at least another year before we start looking at the 22 election stuff, even though that's already starting to brew up anyway. But we're almost in agreement at gmail.com. We are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, we are on YouTube. If you'd like to watch us there, we also have our website up. It is almostinagreement.com. All our episodes are on there as well. Feel free to reach out, ask any questions you want to ask us. We're going to keep working through all the different people. I started a list of how many different elected officials I have to try to chase down, and if I'm at 10% right now, I'm happy. So we're going to keep working, and we'll talk to you all soon.